This video is going to look at molecular compounds, and we'll look at a few examples of how to name and how to write those formulas. One thing to keep in mind, it's important to determine before you start determining how you're going to name it or write the formula is to make sure that you're looking at a molecular compound and not an ionic compound. So remember the difference between the two. Ionic compounds are between a metal and a nonmetal, or it contains a polyatomic ion, whereas molecular compounds are between two nonmetals. So to name molecular compounds, we are going to use prefixes to indicate how many of each atom is present in the compound. I have a table here of the prefixes for up to 10 atoms. These are prefixes that you need to memorize. Note on number 1, mono, I have a parenthesis there that says it's usually omitted. So usually we don't use mono as a prefix. An exception to that would be carbon monoxide. It is very commonly used, and so it is used as a prefix in that molecule, but generally mono is omitted and not used to indicate it. But otherwise, those are the prefixes that would be used. They tell you how many of that atom is present in the compound. When we name molecular compounds, we are going to name the first nonmetal using its element name, and we'll include a prefix if there is more than one of that element present in the compound, and then name the second nonmetal by changing the ending of the element name to IDE, and then also include a prefix if necessary. So let's look at a couple examples. The first one is NBr3, and so to name that, we're simply going to name the first element there, and N stands for nitrogen. There is not a subscript, so we have an understood 1. So we don't need a prefix. So the first name is simply nitrogen. The second element is a bromine. We're going to change the ending to IDE, so we will name that as bromide. There are 3 of them, and so we will use the prefix tri, and it becomes tribromide. Tri meaning 3, and we have that IDE ending. So NBr3 becomes nitrogen tribromide. One more example, we have P4S3. P stands for phosphorus. We have 4 of them in our compound. The prefix for 4 is tetra. So the first element becomes tetraphosphorus. And the second element is sulfur. We're going to have an IDE ending to it. We have 3 of those, so that's trisulfide. So P4S3 becomes tetraphosphorus trisulfide. Okay, now let's look at writing formulas of molecular compounds. So when we are given the name, we can write the formula by using the prefixes to tell us how many of each atom is present. And remember that if there is no prefix and it's an understood, there's just one of them. And then we are going to use that number from the prefix as our subscript for that particular atom. Let's look at an example. The first one we're going to look at is sulfur dibromide. There is no prefix in front of sulfur, and so it is simply an S. Di meaning 2, so we have 2 bromide or bromine, so we are going to have Br with a 2 subscript after it. SBr2 is the formula for sulfur dibromide. Let's look at another one, tetraphosphorus pentoxide. So tetra means 4, and phosphorus, the element symbol is a P, so it becomes P4. Pentoxide, pent is, the prefix means 5, oxide is our oxygen. we have an O with a subscript of 5. So P4O5 is the formula for tetraphosphorus pentoxide. There's something else to keep in mind when we're talking about molecular compounds, and that is diatomic molecules, and that some elements exist as diatomic molecules just in their elemental state. And this is important to remember, especially in the next chapter when we are going to look at writing reactions of chemical reactions, and if in that reaction something is reacting with oxygen gas, it's going to be written as O2. So it's important to know which of these elements exist as a diatomic molecule in their elemental state. And I've listed the ones that do that. There are 7 of them here. So you have hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, and they are named just by their elemental name. So hydrogen is H2. That is how it is formed when it's reacting. These last 4, fluorine, chlorine, bromine, and iodine, are all halogens. They are all found in group 7A. So it's the 7A elements, 7A halogens, and then as well as oxygen, nitrogen, and hydrogen. Those are your diatomic molecules. There are 7 of them. Make sure that you are aware of that and keep that in mind, especially for the next chapter. And so that is just a brief overview of how to write the formulas and names for molecular compounds.